Have you ever wanted something so badly and you thought, if I could just have this one thing, I would be so happy? Well, our story today is about a little rabbit who wanted something pretty badly. It's the little rabbit who wanted red wings. And it's a story by Carolyn Sherwin Bailey. And it's illustrated by Chris Santoro. Do you remember we said illustrated means the pictures were drawn or colored or painted by this person? If it's illustrated by someone, it means they did the pictures, right? So this book is The Little Rabbit Who Wanted Red Wings. Let's see what happens. Once there was a little rabbit who had soft pink ears, bright red eyes, and a short fluffy tail. He was such a cute little rabbit, but he wasn't happy. He wanted to be somebody else instead of the nice little rabbit that he was. Whenever Mr. Bushytail the gray squirrel passed by, the little rabbit would say to his mommy, "Oh, Mommy, I wish I had a long gray tail like Mr. Bushytail." He does have a nice tail, doesn't he? And when Mr. Porcupine passed by, the little rabbit would say to his mommy, "Oh, Mommy, I wish I had a back full of bristles like Mr. Porcupine." And whenever Mrs. Puddle Duck passed by in her two red rubbers, the little rabbit would say to his mommy, "Oh, Mommy, I wish I had a pair of red rubbers like Mrs. Puddle Duck." One day, old Mr. Groundhog heard the little rabbit wishing old Mr. Groundhog, wishing. Let's start that page over, shall we? It says, one day, old Mr. Groundhog heard the little rabbit wishing. Old Mr. Groundhog was very wise indeed, so he said to the little rabbit, "Why don't you go down to the wishing pond? If you look at yourself in the water and turn around 3 times, your wish will come true." So the little rabbit trotted off all alone through the woods until he came to a pool of green water lying in a low tree stump. That was the wishing pond. Beside the wishing pond sat a small red bird drinking happily. As soon as the little rabbit saw him, he began to wish again. "Oh," he said to himself, "I wish I had a pair of red wings." Just then, he looked in the wishing pond and saw his little face. Then he turned around 3 times. And something happened. The little rabbit began to have a strange feeling in his shoulders, like he had in his mouth when his teeth were growing in. It was his wings coming through. So he sat all day in the woods by the wishing pond, waiting for his wings to grow. By and by, just before sundown, he started home to show his mommy his beautiful pair of long red wings. It was dark when the little rabbit reached home. He knocked on the door. His mother opened it immediately, but she didn't know him. No, she really and truly did not know him, for she had never seen a little rabbit with red wings before. The little rabbit had no choice but to go looking for a place to spend the night, because his mommy would not let him get into his own bed. After a while, he came upon Mr. Bushytail's house. He rapped on the door and said, "Please, kind Mr. Bushytail, may I sleep in your house all night?" But as soon as Mr. Bushytail saw the strange rabbit, he slammed the door shut. He had never seen a little rabbit with red wings in his life. The little rabbit went on until he came to Mrs. Puddle Duck's nest down by the marsh. "Please, kind Mrs. Puddle Duck," he said, "may I sleep in your nest all night?" But Mrs. Puddle Duck poked her head out of the nest just a little way. "No, no, no," she said, "go away," for she too had never seen such an odd-looking rabbit in all her life. So the little rabbit went on and on until he came to old Mr. Groundhog's hole. Wise old Mr. Groundhog recognized him at once and let him spend the night. But the hole had beechnuts spread all over it, and while that pleased old Mr. Groundhog, the beechnuts made the little rabbit very uncomfortable. He had a terrible night. By morning, the little rabbit was in despair, and he began to cry. He cried for his mommy. Old Mr. Groundhog, knowing the time was right, said to his little friend, "Do you still want your red wings?" "No, no," said the little rabbit. "Well then," said Mr. Groundhog, "why don't you go down to the wishing pond and wish them off again?" Immediately the little rabbit scampered off to the wishing pond and saw his face in it. Then he turned around 3 times, and sure enough, his red wings got smaller and smaller until they were gone altogether. The little rabbit went straight home to his mommy. She knew him right away and was overjoyed to see the little rabbit that she loved. And the little rabbit never ever wished to be somebody other than himself. And that is the end of our story of the little rabbit who wanted red wings. I hope you liked it. I hope you're happy with who you are and don't start wishing for things that aren't good for you.